Coming up, a city at standstill and full military honours for the funeral of an RAF officer from Birmingham killed in Afghanistan.
Too close for comfort, the motorway tailgaters putting lives at risk.
And all change for Hereford after a £90 million transformation. A city at standstill and full military honours for the funeral of an RAF officer from Birmingham killed in Afghanistan. Details next. Hello, welcome to ITV News Central. On the programme tonight, a city at standstill for Flight Lieutenant Rakesh Chauhan's funeral, one of 5 servicemen killed in Afghanistan.
At home he was my son, and that's how I remember.
Mind the gap, more than half of us drive too close to the vehicle in front.
Staycation boom, why more of us are expected to holiday at home but not here.
And the old cattle market that's now home to big new business.
Good evening. Hundreds of people lined the streets of Leicester earlier as a mark of respect for an RAF officer killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan last month. Flight Lieutenant Rakesh Chauhan grew up in Birmingham.
A funeral cortege passed the Golden Mile, where many businesses remained closed for the morning. A service with full military honours was also held. Rajiv Popat reports.
A community stood side by side this morning, touched by the death of Flight Lieutenant Rakesh Chauhan. He was one of 5 service personnel killed in a helicopter crash in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan last month. The Golden Mile in Leicester came to a standstill. Religious songs were sung as hundreds of people lined the streets.
He was beloved son, and I'm just very proud of him. Very proud of him.
Being a Hindu and a Gujarati has inspired the whole community. It has set an example on us.
Just want to make sure that I was here for these people, for this person, because he's obviously served for his country and given his life off, really.
He was an inspiration for all youth, Asian youth. We miss him always. There's no words to describe what he have done for Leicester.
The procession passed the Royal Air Forces Association before heading to Loughborough Crematorium. Members of the Queen's Colour Squadron carried Flight Lieutenant Chauhan's coffin.
He was an exceptionally talented officer that's universally acknowledged, and I think everyone has really recognised that that's would have led to an amazing career for him.
A flypast and a service with full military honours for a man described by his family as a patriotic son.
Well, we heard there a tribute to Flight Lieutenant Rakesh Chauhan from his station commander. The RAF officer was also described as hugely influential and well respected. His father, Kishore, has been speaking to Rajiv Popat and started by telling him how his son's love for the RAF first began.
His passion started at the age of 11 when he went into the secondary school. I think he just liked the uniform, and he, from a very young age, was very adventurous. I think one thing he was set on was that he did not want an office job or work in any of the conventional things. He wanted to be adventurous and he wanted to do something different.
And it must have brought you great comfort to know that he was doing something he loved.
Oh yes, from a very early age, his mother tried to dissuade him, but he was not. He wouldn't change his mind. We knew he loved it, and he really enjoyed it. He enjoyed the social side of the RAF as well as the actual work and the challenges that were thrown to him.
Did he speak much about his role?
As soon as he went into intelligence, it was something that he did not want to discuss a lot about.
How did that make you feel?
It made us feel very, very apprehensive, because every time we wanted to know how safe he was, what environment he worked in, what he was actually doing. But he was very cagey, and he kept a lot to himself. We found a lot more about him after the tragedy. He always said that when we were tired, or when we said, oh, we are tired today, he says, try doing my job for a day and then you'll know what hard work is, especially to his cousins.
People have been touched, especially here in Leicestershire.
They have been touched. I didn't think that so many people would be affected. It has been really helpful to have people stopping us on the road and really trying to talk to us.
How will Rakesh be remembered? How will you remember him personally?
My memory of him will be of... We were a very close family, and at home he was my son, and that's how I'll remember him.
And a good friend.
A good advisor. He had advice about everything, and quite often I took that advice, and he was a great help. But I'd give all that back just to have him back.
Kishore Chauhan paying tribute there to his son who was killed in Afghanistan. His funeral was held today in Leicester. Next this evening, the family of a man killed by an out-of-hours German doctor has lost the fight to have him extradited to the UK. David Gray died in 2008 after being given an overdose of painkillers by Dr. Daniel Ubani.
He still practices in Germany despite being given a suspended sentence in the country for death by negligence. Mr. Gray's family from Worcestershire have been campaigning ever since for him to face charges over here. Lee Comley reports.
70-year-old David Gray died in 2008 after being given 10 times the safe dose of diamorphine by an out-of-hours doctor working his first shift in the UK. A coroner ruled in 2010 that Dr. Ubani was incompetent and described Mr. Gray's death as gross negligence and manslaughter. Dr. Ubani admitted he'd confused diamorphine with another drug. Since his death, Mr. Gray's family have been campaigning for Ubani to face charges here. But today, the European Court of Human Rights upheld the decision by German authorities, saying that he should not be extradited.
We've had to pay tens of thousands of pounds to take this in legal fees to the European Court of Human Rights, and you know, obviously we feel we've been let down tremendously, but you know, we'll carry on fighting because we feel so strongly about this.
Ubani was struck off the UK register, but is still free to practice as a doctor in Germany. The inquest into Mr. Gray's death heard Ubani had no knowledge of the local area and no NHS experience, and that he'd previously failed to be selected by Leeds Primary Care Trust after failing a language test. Today's order means, as it stands, Ubani will not be facing criminal charges here in the UK, which the family says has wider ramifications.
Because it basically means that people from EU can come over here, commit criminal acts, go back to their country of origin and be completely unaccountable to UK law.
In any society you're going to get these people, but you need to have proper regulations and proper criminal investigations in order to make it less likely that such people as Ubani slip through the net.
The family say they'll be consulting with their lawyer to see whether they can launch an appeal against the decision. They say they just want Ubani to face justice in the country where he made the mistakes that led to their father's death. Lee Comley, ITV News.
2 people have been charged with murder after a man's body was found in a canal in Birmingham. Michael Spalding, who was 39, was pulled from the water off Icknield Port Road in Ladywood earlier this month.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann say they're preparing for what they call a substantial phase of operational activity in Portugal in the coming weeks. British police are currently running their own investigation into what happened to Madeleine from Rothley in Leicestershire. She vanished from a holiday resort in May 2007. The Portuguese authorities have now also reopened their inquiry into her disappearance, but have refused to set up an official joint investigation.
Now, 6 out of 10 motorists have admitted they drive too close to the vehicles in front of them, and the worst offenders of tailgating, as it's known, are men, according to a new survey by the charity Break.
Well, it's a particular problem on motorways because of the risks of not being able to stop at higher speeds, of course. Well, the Highways Agency and police are urging people to leave at least a 2-second gap between vehicles and more if the weather's bad. Keith Wilkinson reports.
According to the statistics, on a 70-mile-an-hour road, you're twice as likely to die in a crash than on roads with a slower speed limit. And with 6 in 10 drivers admitting to driving too close to the car in front or tailgating, the Highways Agency is warning people of the dangers. Inspector Mark Watkins sees tailgating all the time.
He's a little close. It's something we have to deal with day in, day out. The realities of the motorway network, it's one of the safest roads to drive on. However, if you're not paying attention and you're too close to that vehicle in front and the collision happens in front of you and you've not braked in time, or something happens in front of you, such as tailbuck suddenly forming, and you're not paying attention, the speed you're travelling, you're more likely to end up with a serious injury or even die on the motorway network.
We see a lot of these drivers perhaps don't realise when they're not leaving this 2-second rule, they are in effect tailgating. And that is giving yourself far too little time to react in case of an emergency. The stopping distance at 70 miles an hour is 96 metres. If you're speeding as well at 80 miles an hour, that goes up to 122 metres. So if you're less than 2 seconds behind the vehicle in front, you have no chance of reacting in an emergency.
It's something a lot of us worry about. 95% of motorists surveyed said they were concerned to some degree about being the victims of tailgating. Keith Wilkinson, ITV News.
Polling is taking place across the country as millions of voters cast their ballots in European and local council elections. Doors opened this morning at a number of stations, including this one at Edgbaston in Birmingham. Polls close at 10 o'clock tonight.